Japan has played at every World Cup since 1998. They've gone from first-timers with 0 wins to the team that came back and beat Germany and Spain in the same tournament. But here's the question nobody really asks. At each World Cup, who was the first Japanese player to make the moment happen? And who was actually the best player Japan had? Because those are not always the same guy. And if you follow Japan's World Cup history from 1998 to 2026, you can actually watch the whole identity of Japanese football change in real time. So let's go tournament by tournament and find out who struck first and who mattered most. But before we get started, I'm judging this in 2 different ways. First means the player who delivered Japan's first big scoring moment in that tournament. Best means the player who had the biggest overall impact on Japan's World Cup run. Sometimes it's the same name, sometimes it's not even close. Let's start with France, 1998. Japan had finally made its first ever World Cup. That alone was history. Japan were ranked 20th in the world, but nobody gave them a chance. And they were right. They lost to Argentina 1-0 and lost to Croatia 1-0. Heading into the final match against Jamaica, Japan still hadn't scored a single World Cup goal. But after 74 minutes of desperation, Masashi Nakayama received a cross in the box and bang, he scored Japan's first ever World Cup goal. Historic moment. Nakayama became the first Japanese player to put his name on the World Cup stage. But was he the best? Not even close. The best was a 21-year-old midfielder who the entire world was watching, Hidetoshi Nakata. This guy was different, played for Bellmare Hiratsuka in Japan. But after just 3 games at France 98, Serie A clubs were fighting over him. He moved to Perugia and later AS Roma, becoming Japan's first global superstar. Nakata controlled the midfield against Argentina, Croatia and Jamaica. He didn't score, but his vision, passing and composure made him the face of Japanese football for the next decade. Even Nike made him their poster boy. So France 98, Nakayama was first, Nakata was best. 2002, the World Cup comes to Asia for the first time, and Japan is co-hosting with South Korea. The pressure is insane. Opening match, Japan versus Belgium. The stadium is electric. Belgium scored first in the 57th minute. Japan is down at home, and for a second, you can feel the fear creeping in. But 2 minutes later, Takayuki Suzuki gets the ball at the edge of the box and fires a goal 1-1. That was Japan's first goal at a home World Cup. The crowd erupts. Suzuki became the first scorer in 2002, but he wasn't even close to the best, because a 22-year-old midfielder from Arsenal was everywhere. He scored the equalizer against Belgium in the 75th minute to make it 2-2. Then against Russia, he scored the only goal to give Japan their first World Cup win. Junichi Inamoto would become the best player in the 2002 World Cup. Inamoto played all 4 games. He was the engine, his energy, his tackles, his goals. He was Japan in 2002. They beat Russia 1-0, beat Tunisia 2-0, topped their group, and made the round of 16 for the first time ever. Unfortunately, Inamoto's tournament ended when Turkey knocked him out, but he cemented his legacy. So 2002, Suzuki was first, Inamoto was best. Germany 2006. Japan came in with high expectations. This team had experience, talent, big names, but things went sideways fast. First game, Japan versus Australia. In the 26th minute, Shunsuke Nakamura scored a brilliant curling shot from outside the box. Japan had the lead. For a little while, it felt like they were in control. Then everything fell apart. Australia scored 3 times late and won 3-1. Japan drew the second match 0-0 with Croatia, then got destroyed by Brazil 4-1, only to go home in the group stage with 0 wins. Nakamura scored the first goal, but was he the best? In a tournament full of disappointment, the best was still Hidetoshi Nakata. At 29 years old, this was his 3rd World Cup. He played all 3 games, and even though Japan flopped, Nakata showed his class. He controlled tempo, created chances, and kept Japan competitive against Brazil's Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, and Kaká. Fun fact, Nakata retired immediately after the 2006 World Cup at just 29 years old. He walked away from the game at his peak. So 2006, Nakamura was first, Nakata was best. South Africa 2010, Japan versus Cameroon. This is where a new legend was born. In the 39th minute, Keisuke Honda receives a pass on the edge of the box, takes 1 touch and blasts it into the top corner. Absolutely unstoppable. Japan wins 1-0. That was their first opening game victory in World Cup history. This memorable win felt like the beginning of something, because Honda wasn't just the first scorer in 2010. He was the best player too. A 24-year-old midfielder from CSKA Moscow was Japan's most dangerous weapon. He scored against Cameroon and assisted against Denmark in the round of 16. Japan beat Cameroon 1-0, lost to Netherlands 0-1, beat Denmark 3-1 and made the knockout rounds again. They eventually lost to Paraguay on penalties, but Honda was brilliant. Fun fact, Honda would go on to score at the 2014 and 2018 World Cups, becoming the first Japanese player ever to score in 3 World Cups. So 2010, Honda was first and best. Brazil 2014, Japan vs Ivory Coast. In the 16th minute, Keisuke Honda scored Japan's first goal of the tournament with a calm, clinical finish. For a moment, it looks like Japan is about to start strong, but unfortunately Japan collapsed after that. Lost to Ivory Coast 2-1, lost to Colombia 4-1, and drew with Greece 0-0 to go home winless. Honda scored first, but he couldn't carry them, because the best player in 2014 was Shinji Kagawa. At 25, Kagawa was playing for Manchester United in the Premier League. He was Japan's most technically gifted player. His dribbling, vision, and composure kept Japan competitive, even when the results didn't go their way, but it wasn't enough. Japan finished last in their group. So 2014, Honda was first, Kagawa was best. Russia 2018, Japan vs Colombia. This game was insane. Colombia's Carlos Sanchez got a red card in the 3rd minute. Japan got a penalty. Shinji Kagawa stepped up and scored 1-0. Japan held on to win 2-1. It was the first time an Asian team ever beat a South American team at a World Cup. Kagawa scored first, but the tournament belonged to someone else. Once again, Keisuke Honda was Japan's best player. He came off the bench and scored against Senegal. At 32 years old, he became the first Japanese player to score in 3 World Cups. Honda didn't start every game, but when Japan needed him, he delivered. Japan drew Senegal 2-2, shocked Belgium by going up 2-0 in the round of 16, but lost 3-2 in the final minutes. Yet Honda cemented his legacy as Japan's greatest World Cup player ever. So 2018, Kagawa was first, Honda was best. Then comes Qatar, and this is where Japan becomes a real problem. They opened the World Cup against Germany, the 4-time World Cup champions. Germany was up 1-0 and dominating, but in the 75th minute, substitute Ritsu Doan equalized. Then Takuma Asano scored the winner. Japan beat Germany 2-1. 1 week later, Japan did it again. Beat Spain 2-1 with another comeback. Doan scored against Spain too. Doan scored the first goals of 2022, but he wasn't the best. According to a poll by Kyoto News, Ritsu Doan was voted Japan's player of the tournament. 2 goals, 2 comebacks, 2 giants slain. But many fans argue it was Kaoru Mitoma. The Brighton winger was unstoppable. His assist against Spain included that famous inch-perfect goal line pass that stayed in by millimeters. Mitoma's dribbling terrorized defenses. His creativity unlocked Germany and Spain. Japan topped the group, beat Germany, beat Spain, but unfortunately lost to Croatia on penalties in the round of 16. So 2022, Doan was first, Doan or Mitoma was best. You decide. The FIFA World Cup comes to North America, and Japan is ready to make history once again. But before the tournament even begins, Kaoru Mitoma, the Brighton superstar who shocked Germany and Spain back in 2022, suffers a severe hamstring injury in May. Thus, he's out of the tournament. Japan's biggest attacking weapon is suddenly gone, and that's a huge blow. Japan opens the tournament against the Netherlands in Dallas on June 14, 2026. The Dutch take the lead through Virgil van Dijk, and once again Japan finds itself trailing. But Japan doesn't give up, because 6 minutes later, Keito Nakamura, the 25-year-old winger from Reims, receives the ball on the left wing, cuts inside, and fires a powerful shot to score Japan's first goal of the 2026 World Cup, where the crowd explodes with excitement. But Nakamura wasn't finished being the hero, because while he scored Japan's first goal, 25-year-old Real Sociedad star, often called Japanese Messi, became the heart of Japan's attack. Every dangerous move seemed to go through him because of his incredible vision, dribbling, and creativity. Takefusa Kubo would become the best player of this World Cup so far. Back in 2022, Kubo barely played and he was just a substitute. But in 2026, he was the main character. Against the Netherlands, Kubo led Japan's comeback. Time after time, he broke through one of Europe's strongest defenses with brilliant passes and skillful dribbles. Then, in the 89th minute, Daichi Kamada scored after a lucky deflection, making it 2-2. Therefore, Japan earned a valuable point. 5 days later, Japan faced Tunisia, and they destroyed them. Ayase Ueda scored twice, and Japan cruised to a 4-0 victory. It became the biggest World Cup win in Japanese history. Then came the final group match against Sweden in Dallas on June 25th. Daisen Maeda scored a beautiful team goal in the 56th minute. Sweden equalized 6 minutes later through Anthony Elanga, but it didn't matter. Japan finished second in Group F with 5 points. The Netherlands won the group, while Sweden advanced as a third-place team, but finishing second came with a huge challenge. Japan now has to face Brazil in the round of 32. Can Kubo and Japan pull off another miracle? Japan is about to face Brazil on June 29, 2026 at the NRG Stadium in Houston, Texas. But before the match even started, Japan had a huge problem. Takefusa Kubo was injured. He hurt his knee in the game against the Netherlands, and because of that, he had not played since. Japan's best player was out. Yet even without Kubo, Japan came out flying in the first half. In the 29th minute, Kaishu Sano got the ball outside the box, took one touch, and smashed it into the top corner. Japan was beating Brazil on the biggest stage once again. By halftime, Japan still led 1-0, but then the second half began. again, and Brazil finally woke up. In the 56th minute, Brazil got a corner kick. Gabriel Magalhães sent the ball in, and Casemiro rose up and scored the equalizer 1-1. From that moment on, the game changed. Brazil kept pushing forward, while Japan defended with everything they had. After 90 minutes, the score was still 1-1, and the game moved into stoppage time. Japan was so close to penalties, so close to another miracle, but then everything fell apart. In the 96th minute, deep into stoppage time, Brazil's 17-year-old star Endrick played a perfect through ball. Gabriel Martinelli ran onto it, stayed calm, and finished. Brazil scored the second goal, and just like that, Japan's hearts were broken. The players dropped to the ground. The fans back in Tokyo were in tears. Brazil moved on to the round of 16, and Japan was going home. It felt like 2018 against Belgium all over again. Japan had the lead. They fought hard. They believed, but in the end, they lost in the final minutes. So that was Japan's 2026 World Cup story. Nakamura scored their first goal. Kubo was their best player, but without him in the knockout round, Japan came just short of another miracle. The giant killers almost did it again, yet this time they could not finish the job.